Hello and welcome to the third installment of everyone's favourite anime award show that features on this channel, The Degeneracies. Due to obvious circumstances, we can't host the awards in the traditional fashion in a massive sold-out theatre, but don't worry because we are doing the ceremony over Zoom, and this will present absolutely no hindrances to the proceedings whatsoever. So I hope you're can you still hear me? Hello? Fuck it, let's just start the show. While 2020 hasn't been the best year for anime, it would be a lie to say that nothing good came out, since each season had a contender for Anime of the Year. But the same rules apply as my previous two anime award videos. Only one award per show, as I want to cover as much ground as possible, and only aspects individual to 2020. So I can't have Subaru as best protagonist, but I could have ReZero Season 2's OP as best opening. And so, on to the awards. First up, we have the best anime I didn't watch. Obviously, I haven't watched everything, and so I've likely missed out on something good. Id Invaded is from A. Aoki, who also did Recreators and Fate Zero, and has been relatively well reviewed. Adachi and Shimomura looked kinda sweet, and was the most pure-blooded Yuri in a season that was surprisingly packed with Yuri. And I gave up on Fire Force Season 2 halfway in, so maybe the rest of Fire Force Season 2 gets good. But those are series I stand an actual chance of watching, so the award goes to Noblis, not only for being completely dead on arrival, but also because it has the word knob in the title. I don't need to justify anything here. Although, as much as I rail on Noblis, no one was actually expecting Crunchyroll's original to be as good as they ended up being. Even the worst of the four I watched, God of High School, has something going for it, and that is this fucking animation! As much as I wanted to consider giving Jujutsu Kaisen the Best Animation Award for want of showcasing a series that doesn't put me to sleep, the larger number of fights in God of High School is why I have to put it here. MAPPA have been the MVP studio this year in my eyes, since I've seen 4 shows of theirs this year, and the worst one of them is somehow their best animated. But what of the first Crunchyroll webtoon anime this year? Tower of God. That was one that people actually seemed to like, and I can see why. I was captivated by the world. But for what reason? Well, the power system is thought out, but not exactly the most interesting aspect of the world, so isn't that. The characters were serviceable, but conflict didn't entice me till about episode 12, so it wasn't that. But if none of that was keeping me on board, then what was? 3 words. Kevin Penkin soundtrack. I didn't watch Shield Hero, so this was the first Kevin Penkin soundtrack I've heard since Made in Abyss, and while it doesn't quite reach those heights, don't let that distract you from this being a soundtrack that imbues everything with a sense of greater purpose. On the subject of things that were destined for a greater purpose, Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken was the first contender for Anime of the Year in 2020, but now in a majority of the categories I had Eizouken as a contender for have been filled, and so I thought I should at least give the award for Best Protagonist to Midori Asukasa. While not my favourite character within Eizouken, I chose Asukasa because of what she represents within the themes of the show. She is the force of creativity that drives the actions of the Eizouken, and it's because of her creativity that we're able to get some of the most impressive sequences in the show. But none of that is to imply that this is Asukasa's entire role, and she does have some other entertaining aspects to her personality, as evidenced by the fact that she was responsible for half of the quote-unquote Eizouken faces that are on display throughout the show. Although, on the subject of Masaki Yuasa, this wasn't his only show this year, with Japan Sinks 2020 coming out during the summer season. Unfortunately, that one wasn't on par with the quality of his other works, but it wasn't entirely devoid of good moments. I mention this show because I'm adding a new category this year. Best episode of an underwhelming show. And it's going to Japan Sinks 2020, episode 8. This episode has us spend the first half of it in a raft with 2 of the most unlikable characters in the show, and somehow makes them feel likable. And then it kills off one of the main characters in a way that feels earned and actually kind of emotional. This episode is the kind of thing that should spring to mind when we think of Japan Sinks 2020. But it isn't, because there's no way in hell we don't think of this first. Now, on to Best OP, and I would like to drop the facade a little. These past 2 years, I've given the best OP to whatever had the nicest visuals because of symbolism and aesthetics and yada fucking yada. But sometimes, all an OP needs is an absolute banger playing over it. And no amount of pretension is going to prevent me from giving this award to No Gun's Life's second OP. If you get the lead singer of Man with a Mission, the band responsible for half the hypest anime OP songs that came out the last 10 years, and combine him with Hiroyuki Sawano, the man responsible for half the hypest OSTs that came out the last 10 years, you're likely to get something good. But that song aside, the visuals aren't half bad either, with good uses of lighting and all that jazz. This is what kept me watching No Gun's Life, especially after it stopped being fun. Although I feel this could have been avoided if Sawano also did the entire soundtrack. Holy shit, why didn't Sawano do the entire soundtrack? And so we come to the best ED, and I suppose I'll give it to BNA. I wanted to give this to Magia Records ED, but as pretty as it is, the music is forgettable and the character it depicts isn't interesting enough to warrant a smooth visual sequence. BNA's ED, however, is Goodshit. It's weirdly calming, which is not an adjective many people would reserve for a trigger anime. On top of this, the fact that it only really uses two colours, which are the main two colours that are a recurring motif throughout the show, by the way, also shows its staff behind this ED's ability to do a lot with a little. Lanazara looking at me like that makes me uncomfortable. I can't tell you why. Now, best sequel is a category that I have a special rule applied to. Often, this will not go to the best sequel in terms of quality, but instead it will go to the biggest step up in quality, or the biggest surprise. I say this because Kaguya Season 2 is a great anime, but the sequel to one of the best anime last year, being one of the best anime this year, is no surprise to anyone, especially me. But a sequel that was receiving a lot of hype actually lived up to it, and this is what's going to get the award. And you know what? I finally get ReZero. ReZero is a show whose name was familiar to me, but no one was telling me it was the best anime of all time. When I decided to check out the first season, it was better than I was expecting, but it didn't really get going for me until around episode 16, and even then it still had its problems. And Season 2 decides that it doesn't want to use cute girls to keep us invested, or at least not just cute girls. Instead, they do the unthinkable by making Subaru actually likeable, and after that, the plot is executed masterfully, giving us more suffer porn, more plot twists, and more of the intrigue that people liked from ReZero Season 1, but this time done fantastically. Bear in mind, I'm only talking about the first half, so the second half could still fuck it up, but I'm awestruck nonetheless. To set the stage for the Best Comedy Award, I want to talk about An American Werewolf in London. There's a scene where the protagonist meets with several ghosts in an erotic cinema, and it's very eerie and stuff, but I was kind of distracted while watching the scene. Why? It's because the porno they're watching is also a comedy skit which I found weirdly funny. But why am I telling you that a mix of porn and comedy can be surprisingly good? Well, it's because Interspecies Reviewers is a whale of a time. It is a show that basks in its concept without wearing it thin. Despite the gratuitous and much appreciated amount of sex that they're allowed to show, much of the show is still focused on making us laugh. It is a show that puts the smash back into smash hit, and frankly, this is going to be a hard act to follow for future shows that plan to be as explicit as this show can be. Seeing Yesterday for me was a show that had potential. It's not that it turned out awful, it's just that it couldn't keep up momentum as it went on. But that should not detract from how amazing those first few episodes were and how genuinely human its characters and conflicts felt. But I suppose it's not the worst thing in the world that Seeing Yesterday for me dropped off. Because now I have absolutely no qualms about naming Great Pretender as Best Drama. While that also had an ending that could have been a bit better, it still ended with style. It also started with style. In fact, there's not a single moment of this show that is without style. This is a great original anime. But that is not to say that I want more, because, well, Vinland Saga 2. Come on, Wit, just make it. You know you want to. And for Best Action, I don't care what anyone says. It's going to Akudama Drive. I like a surprise, and this show was quite the surprise. It could have gone to shit within the first 5 minutes, and I would have kept watching because of the general cyberpunkiness. But it didn't go to shit, and actually kept up the pace going for its entirety. And the action is surprisingly nice to watch as well, with fights using anything ranging from fists, or guns, or scalpels, or lightsabers, or when it feels like it, all of them at the same time. This show had me reconsidering my anime of the year, and came close to toppling it with how much I liked its ending. But what is anime of the year? You'll find out later. This hasn't really been the year to see anime movies in the cinema, or anything in the cinema for that matter. But that does explain why Whisker Away is so popular, since it came out on Netflix, a pretty big platform. It's a very sweet film, and I'm glad that it's getting Studio Colorido some attention. But they also released Burn the Witch this year, which, while flawed, had a world that was interesting enough to watch and characters I wouldn't mind seeing more of. But I want to talk about franchise movies, which were thin on the ground over here. But there was one franchise film I watched, and that was pretty wonderful. Or to put it in other words, Subarashi. Dawn of the Deep Soul reminds me of all the reasons I love Made in Abyss, namely the prevailing feeling of, oh god, that's gonna take a while to clean out of the carpet. This one was released online, and watching it in the comfort of my own room meant that I could both view it and send snarky videos to my friends. Man, I really love this new Fast and the Furious movie. This movie serves as Bondrewd's time to shine, and he is a genuinely terrifying villain. but I'm glad that Kinema Citrus aren't done with Made in Abyss, and that they're going to continue adapting the story further. In the meantime, I recommend you watch this film if you're a fan of Made in Abyss, because this is the best Father's Day movie ever. But back onto best anime series. I'm going for a bit of a curveball. This isn't technically the best anime out there, but it's certainly my favourite this year. And while not the anime we need, it is certainly the anime I want more of. An anime which does have a bit wrong with it, but gets so much more of it right. So anyway, Dorohedoro. Masterpiece is not a word I use lightly, so I'm not going to use it here. Instead, I'm going to use the word joyous, because that is what Dorohedoro is. Despite Mappa turning a lot of heads this year, out of the 4 shows of theirs I watched, it's the ugliest one that I've been recommending to everyone. But even with that being said, Dorohedoro looks damn fine for a CG show. Not Beastars necessarily, but the disjointed and disgusting world could not come to life any other way. But despite it reveling in how weird and downright brutal it can be, it is somehow also one of the most adorable shows I've seen this year, with the central characters, including the villains, each having their own personal charms that give me the sense I've gotten to know them, and this is a show that does that better than most sitcoms out there. Should more anime strive to be like Dorohedoro? No, because what Dorohedoro represents is something truly unique. And with that philosophy of choosing what I personally preferred over what was widely acclaimed, let's move on to the Best Girl Award. I considered Niha, because there was potential, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't know the character well enough for her to make the cut. But thankfully, there's a very obvious candidate for who Best Girl is going to be. Literal girlfriend material. Did not make the list. Chizuru was good, but not my thing. The literal wife material also didn't make the list. It was not Tsukasa. Oh, don't tell me you chose the small one who thinks that they're God who got popular this year. I did choose the small one who thinks they're God that got popular this year. Not that one. Damn, there's more of these than I thought. No, the other one. That's the spice. Iwanaga Kotoko is an S-tier waifu, as in there's many words beginning with S that I would use to describe her. Snarky, short, and surprising. Inspector is a show that is almost 85% dialogue, and frankly, I wish it was 100% dialogue, just so we could see more of Iwanaga's trademark wit. And this face, on anyone else it would be called a shit-eating grin, but on her it's a full-on smugnum opus. In this year's waifu scene, Iwanaga stood tall above the rest, which is impressive considering she only has one leg. Now that the 3rd annual Degeneracies are over, you're probably looking forward to all the anime coming out in 2021. But you know what I'm looking forward to more? Putting the results of the last 3 years' worth of Degeneracy Awards into a spreadsheet. Let me tell you, I'm fucking ecstatic.